Welcome, welcome, welcome everybody to another edition of Hot Program. I am your host with the most, all the way from the East Coast. And as always, folks, I am in airplane mode. And now a man who thinks Jesus developed a wide following because so many people wanted a God who was more down to earth. A man who needs no introduction. Now,
Hey,
I think
Pakalaka.
I think a lot of people, I think this is one of the essential deceptions of Christianity is I think people really do like the idea of this human God. Oh, he was God, but he was actually fully human, and he was poor, and he was born to nobody. Like they love that, and I think it really works. Unfortunately, it's one of the like essential, I think, falsehoods that Christians are convinced of. That they
Well,
have this down to earth God.
I think that's one of the reasons he worked so well. Like, look, this guy is from the old neighborhood, that sort of thing. And he had it great. He had all this wealth and heaven and power and all that stuff, and
Be
gave it up to
free.
come down here and spare us from eternal suffering because his dad is just that way to where he has to have people suffer eternity because he can't stand to be near them. Eh, Nobody's perfect. Read the Old Testament, you'll see. Other
All
than
right.
Melchizedek, there's not a perfect person in there.
All right, hey PC, hey Cliff, hey YouTube Punk.
Hi,
Good to
everyone.
see y'all in chat. All right, so today we're gonna be talking about how being a cop broke my brain. And so this is a guy who was a police officer, I guess is no longer a police officer, and is now a policing abolitionist. So some popped up on my feed. Should be interesting, but I'm also thinking it should be um, insightful in terms of some of the aspects of policing and police training that we don't often get insights to as
hmm
lay people.
Yeah, I have some friends in law enforcement, neighbors in law enforcement, and to have them tell me stories about the things they've seen and gone through, it's astonishing. And sort of how they view the departments themselves and certain people within the department, and how they interact with like the district attorney, to where like in LA the district attorney is not on their side. They wish they had more support from the local district attorneys, but they just don't have what they need. And I'm talking about the guys and gals, police officers that are doing their jobs, the way we would want them to, actually protecting us
Well, I don't
from
know. If
the
well, I
real
guess we're
ills
gonna
of
we're gonna hear
society.
from him, but I don't. I think this guy's gonna say that's not a thing. I think this is a hotly
Well,
contested issue in the community. You got a lot of
look,
ACAB in the chat, right?
well, but I just want the people that write that ACAB stuff. That's unnecessary. I think that's unfair. I've had a life where I've had a lot of help from police officers, via this reason or that reason. They've come to my aid or just unexpectedly helped me out with something like a photo shoot. By blocking traffic, or hey, I'm trying to shoot this race on the Ravenel Bridge in South Carolina. I don't have a press credential. And yet they're like, you go out there anyway. You go right ahead and you go ahead and get your shots the way you want to.
But I
You
still
know,
think
them Go ahead.
I mean that's fine. That's your experience, right? But like,
Yeah, everybody's entitled to
but
it.
people, right? And so people who think that we have serious problems with policing, don't think that the occasional cop doing something right, or the fact that cops are helpful once in a while, is in any way a motivation to overlook the more systematic problems. And most of the
But
times when people think, oh, the cops did this really helpful thing for me, like, we don't need cops to do that, right? Like there would have been another service that you get a permit, right, and you can do things. So, but yeah, I've
well,
been helped by police,
I'll
but I think we should
mhm.
distinguish between, we're talking about systematic versus, right. There, and you and I have similar disagreements about a lot of things, because I have, we can point to a Christian that does a good thing. Doesn't mean Christianity isn't untrue, abusive, and in my opinion, we should get rid of it. But yeah, let's go ahead and let the guy talk. Let's let the guy get started. And yeah, I agree. Like, so like YouTube punk deists rarely hold cops accountable. I mean, I guess if some cop told me, oh, we don't get the support we need from the district attorney's office, I'm not gonna have any sympathy for that, because again, in most places the system is so biased towards the cops, it's insane.
Hey there, welcome to That Dang Dad. My name is Phil, and tonight I want to return to a topic I haven't done a video on in a while: law enforcement. If you're new to the channel, you should know that I used to be a police officer in a pretty rowdy part of California. In the years since then, though, I've become a police and prison abolitionist, meaning I believe that the entire concept of police forces and prisons is not reformable, and it must be replaced with something that's more compassionate, more just, more committed to dignity and meeting human needs. I'll put a link in the description below if you want to see me do a deeper dive on that topic.
I think this guy's like, there's something going on here that's like weird, and I don't know if it's like I don't know. I don't know if it's like right, but there's something very put on about his demeanor and speech and like speaking style. Like, he kind of reminds me. He looks like a kind of like a disheveled, like a disheveled brother of the pastor I used to work for. But then he's got that, like, I don't know, that like algorithm friendly presentation style, like when you're trying to do the YouTuber thing and we're gonna have a calm converse. It just hits me weird. So I've just got to try to I got to try to look past that. I'm listening to him. I'm excited to hear what he has to say. Just something a little off about his
Tonight, though,
All right,
is
so
an
wait,
exciting
wait, wait.
academic tag.
I wait,
Go ahead,
wait.
go ahead.
So I wish you could go back and screenshot that look on his face, because in 1 month from now, I should have already have had a couple of days with my daughter, and we'll see if my eyes
Yeah,
are
if your eyes
open
look
like
back.
that. Like,
It is, right? It's like
okay,
the blink twice if you
I'm
need help facial
I'm I'm
expression.
I'm awake, and I don't. It's okay. I don't know how long it's gonna last, because the baby's gonna need something any second, and I gotta rush to her. So his look reminds me of what I expect my look on my face will be in a month, when the little girl is crying or needs a very horrible diaper change or something like that. And by the way, for those like Sumami and Crystal, I've never changed a poopy diaper on a baby. I've changed like 3 diapers in my life. So here comes reality, and it's coming fast.
Yep.
I don't suspect it'll be like rodeo, where I'm just gonna try to get this diaper changed in another 9 seconds, or 8 seconds or whatever. I don't think that's gonna happen. I think it'll probably take me somewhere around 15, 20 minutes to change one diaper, and that is assisted with like a phone call or calling one of my many super wonderful neighbors over, saying, look, I'm on my own here. I sent my wife off with some neighbors to have fun and get a break, and now I'm dealing with a substance that NASA probably wants to study for its adhesive properties, so we'll see, we'll
Yep.
see.
And the philosophy and all that nerd shit. And I want to get personal about how my time in law enforcement really fucked my brain up. Tonight we're going to be talking about state violence and some of the nasty stuff that cops see in the line of duty, so if you're not in the mood for blood and
content
guts
warning.
and man's inhumanity to man, you might want to skip this one tonight. Anyway, there's nothing cops love more than captivating an audience with a war story, so I'll start with one of mine. So there I was, Saturday night, M4 rifle in hand, monitoring the perimeter of a housing complex in the middle of a neighborhood. Our gang unit had been tracking an armed and dangerous gangster wanted for murder, and they'd seen him enter the middle property of a triplex where his family was hiding him. We quietly evacuated the two end properties. We prepared to make a dynamic entry, as they say. You know, this is the police, come out with your hands up, no answer, in go the flashbangs, and go the tear gas. After a moment, the gang unit radioed that the gangster had climbed up into the attic of the triplex, which was accessible to the two end units. I was tasked with standing in the doorway of the south unit in case he tried to sneak out that way. I was reminded that he was armed, dangerous, and had already killed. So there I stood as the gang unit began to throw more and more tear gas up into the attic, waiting to see if this guy was going to drop down right in front of me. And I did what I'd been trained to do. I visualized shooting him in the chest until he stopped moving. Over and over and over and over again. I pictured him crashing through the ceiling. I pictured him sneaking around a corner. I pictured him running at me. I pictured him shooting at me. I pictured him wounding me. And every time, I pictured firing until the threat had been eliminated. I have no idea how many times I annihilated this guy in my mind palace. 40, 50 times. And it's not because I hated this guy or really wanted to score my first kill on the job. It was because I wasn't quite sure I could actually do it. I was taking a page out of Dave Grossman's training, and I was psyching myself up and convincing myself that yes, I could kill someone if I had to. After all, he was armed, he was dangerous, and he'd already killed before.
Yeah, so you can see like the militarization that I think people often don't really think about, that this is a really unhealthy, toxic, and very, very dangerous dynamic to have in a community. And also the invasiveness, the fact that, let's be real, over-policing is a problem, but it's primarily a problem in communities of color. And it's primarily a problem in communities of color who are dealing with predominantly white forces who don't live there. So literally, what he is describing as, you know, there was a bad guy, we had to go get him. I feel like when he's telling the story, and I'm sure if I talked to the neighbors, a lot of that stuff, they were more alarmed about the gang unit being there. Now you're smoking out places and tear gassing places. Y'all are showing up with automatic rifles, fully suited out in military apparel. Like, it's just a scene that doesn't need to be there. And notice how when you go into largely white communities, you don't see this intensity of policing. I was talking the other day about how I went to a Catholic school in a small little Italian village called Roseto, Pennsylvania. And the police department was a 2-car garage. And every time we would drive past it, my mother would laugh. Really what that was my first experience in understanding the dynamic of over-policing is really something that happens in communities of color, in urban communities, and places where people from different cultures are largely mixed, so what we would call otherwise metropolitan areas. Mm-hmm. When you get into ritzy places, suburban places, yada, 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 all of a sudden there's no intensity of policing. So largely speaking, people in those type of communities don't understand what it's like to feel that the police are an invading force in your community because you've never experienced it. You've never experienced the escalation involved in fighting crime being worse than the crime itself. The other thing is, it's always very interesting how these things are framed, because again, the gang unit, yes, sometimes it is white supremacists, it's neo-Nazis, especially on the inside, especially once you get locked up. Boom, of course, they're in the gang unit and stuff like that. But notice a lot of time that gang stuff is coded people of color and justifies escalation in a certain military-like response, when it's white folks that are in the different neighborhoods and they're heavily involved in gang, even when they're involved in murder, it's organized crime, it's the mob, and it gets handled very much with the white glove side of doing these things. They don't send in the gang unit with the AK-47s and all of this stuff. So it's just very interesting how even like the setup reveals a lot of the issues with policing. And yeah, like, and I think for a lot of people, they just want a person to say, oh yeah, I was outside a housing project. You were in the hood. And we were there for gang. There was gangs involved. And we were told the person was armed and dangerous, right? And now all of a sudden, all of this stuff is justified. Yeah, this is my take on that.
Have you ever been at gunpoint by police officers' pocket locker?
Yes.
How many times?
How many incidents? Like,
yeah,
probably like 2 different incidents, but probably half a dozen guns or more total.
Okay, I've been held at gunpoint.
I've been surrounded by police.
Yeah, I've been held at
guns pointed at me.
I've been held. Yeah, I've been held at gunpoint probably 4 times in LA. Never happened in Fort Wayne. I lived in Indiana for like the first 22 years of my life. Never happened a single time. Moved here and I'm like, holy crap, it's just like those rap songs.
Yeah.
So yeah, and
Yeah.
I'll share 2 of those before we finish the program here, because I think both have very valuable lessons to learn. One, well, you could compare the 2. When I give you the 2, you can see that how the police handled themselves in both situations, and clearly the difference in training. There's an abundant difference in training between the 2 incidents that I'll share.
Yeah, and by the way, I don't think they should have guns. I think guns are special weapons and tactics. There's plenty of police forces throughout the world where regular cops don't have guns. Nobody should. And again, like, I've never had another person been at gunpoint by anybody else. Police terrify me. I'm more afraid of the police than I'm anybody else. And I think people don't get that. So maybe that guy was accused of murder. Maybe he had killed somebody in some sort of turf war, drug deal, whatever. But most people don't feel like they're under constant threat of violence from gangs. This is like a myth most people feel. Yes, every once in a, like, I've worked at a church and had a young person die catching a stray bullet in a gunfight between gangs. We're not saying that gang violence doesn't come with problems, but for the most part, those people's lives were not being disrupted by this gang member. They were severely disrupted when these cops decided to turn this into Baghdad.
What options did I have? Ultimately, blinded and choking on tear gas, he fell through the roof of the middle unit directly in front of our canine unit. Did you know dogs are not incapacitated by tear gas? The gangster and I both learned this right about the same time, and it was a bad night for him. After all that, I put my gear back in my cop car, took a quick drink of water, and resumed my shift. Off to go break up loud parties, referee marital disputes, and chase away teens on a would-be beer run. All that violent energy I'd been working with, all that visualization of hurting and killing people, gone. On to the next call. I tell you this story because it's emblematic of much of my law enforcement career. When I first started out, I was criticized for being meek, timid, too slow to show dominance out in the field. I was taught that showing that kind of weakness on calls would make me a target for attack. I was shown hundreds of videos of cops being killed on routine calls for service by assailants who didn't really look like killers.
YouTube Punk, I want to check out that video, that Dark Matter 25. Yeah, it looks good. I definitely want to check it out. So yeah, this is part I think is super interesting when he gets into this training, and you realize that we call it propaganda, is not just something that the public is, inundated with, but something that the police themselves are inundated with. And I did have the opportunity to sit on, I've worked with police, I've worked in the prosecutor's office, I've sat on the steering committee for the police department in Newark, New Jersey. It was very serious stuff for the city and for the particular ward that I lived in. And this was one of the issues that was most pressing to the community was, yes, the idea of people policing in our community who don't live here, don't know us. There was a lot of emphasis put on teachable moments. There's a lot of times when, like you said, you're chasing kids off from a would-be liquor run or refereeing let's cut minor domestic dispute or whatever. Let's assume there's no, physical assaulting or whatever involved. There's a lot of times when the police could teach, they could make people safe, they could do a lot of things without necessarily criminalizing or doing things that are going to cost people down the line. But a big part of it was this fear, was the fact that the police are really taught to fear people in the communities they're policing. And then from that, a lot of their tactics and their training and all that stuff is about protecting them. So you've been brainwashed into believing that although you should be protecting and serving this community, really this community is a danger to you. And so then you go inserting yourselves in situations where you don't feel safe. And now you're the one with the weapon, the legal authority and all this type of stuff. And so this creates a very combustible situation. And so I'm kind of happy that he's getting into the training, but you can hear from some of this stuff, like, yeah, this is definitely gonna make you afraid. This is telling you have a very scary job, and you never know, that little old lady you're helping cross the street, grandma might be packing, and she may just be here to take out a cop today. And we're not going to get good policing if that's how you're trained. Their egos are so fragile. Yep. See, I wonder if he'll get into that too.
Again, that's not everybody.
It's not everybody, but it's enough of them that it's a problem. And the fact, and to be honest, I think it's a big problem. I think it's even a bigger problem that people have to keep telling us it's not everybody. Because it's not a good faith argument. That's not a good faith argument. Let's be clear. It's not a good faith argument. There can't be a systematic problem that requires everybody to be bad. They've all got to be corrupt. No, when something is when it's enough of you that people keep having to remind us that they're not all bad, that says a lot.
So I'm going based off the people I know that are law enforcement officers. Okay,
but I don't think you should do that. I think that's bad. Come on, we're counter apologists. Why are we going off anecdotes instead of data?
Because they have experience. This isn't Mike Licona telling me some lady he knows had a garbage can lid fly across the kitchen.
I'm not talking about Mike Licona. I'm talking about criminologists. Go read a book by a criminologist. Like, study crime, study policing.
And again, I'm going off of what was shared with me by people I know.
I don't believe them though. I'm not going to buy that, and I don't.
But I don't need you to believe them. I'm just trying to share what I was told. So I've heard it from two different people who are currently in law enforcement. The problems that they see, it's roughly 3% of the population. So 3% of the general population of any given community will be criminals. A percentage of those will be repeat criminals, say a burglar or a car thief. Some of those people, they're always going to be car thieves. That's just what they do. They'll just keep doing it. You'll keep catching them. And if you have a good district attorney, that person goes away. They get convicted, they go off to prison. If you have a system like in LA, they get a ticket and points against them. And I guess if they rack up so many, then they go away. Well, that's not fair to the taxpayer, But 3% within the department itself, you have about 3%. And they take exhaustive measures to find the rogue elements and not let them in. I've had the two people I'm
This is
thinking of.
just cop propaganda. This is not
Again,
true. It
these
kind of.
these aren't strangers that I'm repeating what
But can
they've
I be
told
honest
me.
with you? I
These aren't
literally think
strangers. These are friends.
that's the problem. I think just like when you got your good one preachers and all this, your emotional attachment to these who you perceive as good people really has you not able to see the systematic problem. And I got to say something.
They're telling me there is a systematic problem.
Okay, I've worked
telling me.
in a
They're
prosecutor's
telling
office
me.
in a
They're
major
telling me.
city, and I'm
Did you
telling
see
you there's a
systematic
problem.
problems?
Absolutely, 100%.
Did you see systematic problems with the prosecutor's office?
the process?
Did the prosecutor's office handle everything beautifully, perfectly well, A++?
If you want to know the truth, the problem was always, like it always is that they're two on the side of the cops. You know, and it just depends on where you're at. Like I could tell you about a judge who used to be a public defender who made it damn near impossible to prosecute anybody because she just her court practices set the bar too high. But this is what I'm talking about. I don't want to trade anecdote for anecdote. But what I'm saying is, like, you're like, why are we denying the fact that there's systematic? This guy's a cop,
but I'm not denying.
He's telling you that he, as a cop, thinks we need to get rid of policing. But for some reason, like the experience you have with your friends, who I don't believe, like it's literally laughable. We see how much the police get away with. It's literally laughable. Like, sure, maybe I'm sure they don't get everything they want from the prosecutor's office, nor should they. Matter of fact, them saying that really shows you they think the prosecution should be on their side when really the prosecutors should be upholding the law, and really prosecutors shouldn't be seen as having sides. But there's no way. But there's no way. But go to the public defender's office. Go talk to the defendants. Go talk to the people who get locked up and tell them that the cops are complaining that the prosecutors aren't giving them enough support. You will get laughed out of the room every single time. Why? Because of course cops say that.
You've disconnected what I said, right? The instance where the problem is generated because the prosecutors just give the person a ticket as opposed to a trial for committing the crime. Right? You just send them on their way. That was really happening in LA during COVID, and it's continued since then.
So you think the problem is not strict enough? We're not being tough enough in our punishment.
If you have in this county, that is the case. If a person is a burglar putting other people's lives in danger, and you catch them, you don't just send them home.
I'm gonna say this as nicely as I can. Y'all are super out of touch. Super out of touch.
At the same time, on my days off, I was training in Krav Maga alongside many other cops and military veterans. Krav is extremely aggressive, and it very often touches on mindset. We trained on how to fight a carjacker inside your own car. We trained on last-ditch techniques to disarm somebody who was trying to shoot you execution style. One night, the instructor made us fight, cradling a baby doll in our arms to simulate our own child. The point was that you never knew what kind of awful situation might be coming your way. So over time, I internalized this message. At any given time, someone out there is going to hurt you if you're not ready to hurt them first. If you let your guard down for even a second, they'll kill you. In the police business, this is how we talk about officer safety. The most respected veteran officers that I worked with were the ones that were pulling young guys back from running around blind corners. They were the ones saying, hey, did you search that dumpster before we turn our back on it? You got the sense that they had seen things and that they knew how to keep themselves safe. And you got the sense that the big thing you can do to protect yourself on the job is to mentally prepare for that day. And since you never knew what form the attack would take, it's best to just run scenarios in your head constantly, building those mental pathways so that when it finally does happen, you'll know exactly what to do. So that's what I trained my brain to do on duty. I drove around and I imagined. What if a guy with a gun popped out of the trunk of that car over there and started shooting at me? What if I saw a man with a knife running down that alley? What would I do if a plane crashed into City Hall? Over time, my brain began to do
This
this
is like,
off-duty.
it's almost like it's really reminding me of Christianity. It becomes a death cult. It becomes a death cult where like every day you're just thinking about who might be trying to kill me. Am I going to have to defend myself? Who am I going to have to shoot? Um, it's, you know, this is really, this is why people talk about community policing, and like, there is really a need to retrain cops, because this is just like, I don't know, at some point, this level of paranoia is far beyond preparedness and readiness for the job, and it becomes like a psychotic delusion. Like it becomes like a really, becomes a thing you need treatment for. It becomes a thing like
So
I got.
I think the good point of saying that this guy is kind of facing a psychotic delusion, I think that's a real solid point. What we don't have is the testimony of 50 guys saying this. We have this guy saying this. Now, in marketing, you learn if you got one, you got thousands. That's just a fact. The rest don't speak up, or very few of the others will speak up. So it would be interesting to know how the mindset of maybe guys even older than this, with 30 years experience, 20 years experience, are looking at their daily routine in their police cruisers as they drive around. I'm not seeing the comments. I know they're flashing on the screen kind of fast, but I haven't. The last one I read was Crystals.
Oh, I don't know. I find like looking at them on another tab or my phone's usually the best way to see all of them.
Okay.
Because I don't know. You should see them in Restream.
As
Well,
well.
again, I'm doing restream on my phone, so the screen's tiny.
I don't know.
It's like
Okay.
it's not a sizable screen. So
Sit in restaurants with my back to the front door so that I could monitor everybody coming in. I walked through mall parking lots with my head on a swivel. I stared down people who looked out of place just so they'd known that I'd seen them.
Okay. Now here's another thing that I kind of like with mine. Yes, that's what we're saying about cops. Something I think people don't realize is there's the counter to this. My entire life, especially really my entire life, but especially once you become old enough to drive, especially as a black man in this country, I have the counter training to that guy. Every single day you leave your house, your parents are worried about your blackness costing you your life. Every time you get pulled over by a cop, you seize up in terror because you don't know how it's going to go. The police are a constant and ever-present threat to me because, again, like I'm constantly I see very little protect and serve, and I see lots of police brutality. I know that there's, that the justice system is inherently racist from top to bottom. Again, even as a person who's worked in the system, it doesn't matter because it doesn't matter what you do 9 to 5. You step out of that office, you're still a black man in America. So it's almost like nobody cares. Like even people who do conceptually understand the realities of police brutality or the realities of over policing, or they've read the new Jim Crow about the justice system, they really overlook or don't have an appreciation for the psychological terror and the trauma that causes entire communities.
Constantly in a state of vigilance. Not concern, just vigilance. My Krav instructor used the color code system to talk about emotional states, white, yellow, orange, red, black. And he used to say that you should never leave the house without being at least code yellow, that you should never be totally relaxed in public. And I never was. And to this day, I never am. It's been a long time since my cop days now, but this hypervigilance has never left me. And what at one time felt like a survival tool I was proud of, now just makes me exhausted and probably exhausting to be around. I hate leaving my house. I don't like going out and doing things with lots of people. If it's too loud and crowded somewhere, I don't feel like I'm in control. I don't feel safe. Sometimes I dissociate a little bit just as a treat. But even worse than the hypervigilance, the thing I can't turn off is my imagination. Not only did law enforcement train me to imagine 1,000 different horrible events, law enforcement involved my participation in 1,000 different horrible events. I've seen bodies riddled with bullets. I've seen stabbing victims crawling through their own blood. I've seen car accidents render the driver unrecognizable. And I've seen children horrifically abused and even killed. So even now, long after my cop days, my brain will conjure up unbidden hey, what if this happened? Hey, what if a home invader breaks in and takes you hostage? What if your partner drives off a bridge? What if there's a mass shooting at this theater? All kinds of stuff. And for a while, I could tell myself I was just being prepared. Mass shootings happen all the time in the United States. Why shouldn't I mentally prepare? I wrote this line after the Buffalo shooting and before the Uvalde shooting. It wasn't until my daughter was born that I started to realize that maybe actually what I was doing wasn't normal. All new
Yeah,
parents
and again, like it does remind me so much of Christianity, where it's so much about death and focusing on death. And you could just be in the middle of any conversation, just in the middle of lunch at a Christian, but it's all about where are you going to go after you die? What are you going to do about that? It's insane. And then it's also like the preppers, right? Like the doomsday people. You go to your mom's house and she's got like the bottled water stacked to the ceiling, and canned goods and 3 extra freezers. And we really do have whole subcultures in our society that spend all of their time thinking about the worst situation. And I do think that has an effect on all of us. There's just some of that you can't help but have rub off on you when you're surrounded by people like this.
I'm reminded of a term that I heard on, what was that podcast? They're in Redwood City, California. It's a Buddhist podcast. And the guy, Gil Fronsdal, talked about papancha. And that's this constantly making up scenarios in your mind instead of just letting life play out in front of you and being a part of your real life as it occurs. The stopping and making up scenarios, is it going to go this way and this way and this way, and allowing that to build up anxiety within you. As I couldn't remember the word right away, so I started Googling making up scenarios in your head. And one of the things that popped up, as you know, Google will complete your sentence for you, thinking it knows what you mean, is mental illness.
Yeah, absolutely.
From tales from a friend of mine. It's funny, I keep pointing towards his house because he lives like that way from me. This particular friend, he's a police officer currently, and he told me, we had a long talk. He just really opened my eyes. He said he got a call that a baby had drowned. He was the closest officer to this home. So he goes there and he's trying to revive this baby, and he can't do it. So he goes back to the police station, and if I'm remembering the story right, he had to file a report. And instead of allowing him to talk to some psychological counselor, they sent him right back out. This guy talks about seeing drivers rendered unrecognizable. I bet they sent him right back out. Again and again, and all the things he talked about.
Mm-hmm.
You got debriefed. Mm-hmm. This is a bigger thing.
Yep.
Go get him, Tiger.
Yep. Back here tomorrow. So that's kind of interesting. That now, and these are complex issues, but not only do they need radical reform, they need to reform their work practices and the way they're shifting. Because what happens like that is you need to have staffing and stuff set up to the point where people like that could take time off, paid time off, and then have other people step up and take their shifts. But this is why over policing is such a problem, because not a lot of people want to be cops given the current cultural significance of what's going on with policing. And so part of it is I'm sure the defense they have for these practices is that they're understaffed, but they're understaffed in large part because their own inhumane and horrific practices have damaged their reputation. It's largely a self-inflicted wound. And it is a problem because I got to be real. The more I learn about history, the more it becomes undeniable that the police were an instrument of oppression for the people in power. They were slave catchers. They were meant to stop people from revolting against the authority of the church. They largely were used to suppress just even like leftists and progressives, right? And communists and things like that. And so you're trying to create a world that includes fully fully enfranchised, marginalized people. Yet at the same time, you're trying to convince them that they need this institution that was about oppressing them from the very beginning. And to me, that is just one of the fundamental contradictions of like modern life in a 21st century democracy that we really haven't dealt with. And we need to. And I don't know all of what the solution looks like, but to me, that is a chink in the armor. That is one of the things that makes me think we need a new system, a radically new approach, like a whole new reset, because it's just very hard for some. It's very hard for those of us who knew that they were always here to keep their foot on our throat, that somehow we're gonna make it something else. So it's tough. It's tough, and I don't feel sympathy for these people. I don't feel sympathy. Y'all were slave catchers. Y'all were doing the bidding
none of these
church
people
and all these things.
It sounds like you don't feel sympathy for the dead. Look, this guy was not a slave catcher.
No,
I don't never a slave catcher.
No, what I'm saying is I don't feel sympathy towards the institution and people's reputation of the institution. But yes, when you're a cop, because even now, like Sonia Massey, like that dude was dishonorably charged from the military and bounced around whatever it was, 4 departments in 6 years or whatever. So they don't give a fuck. Y'all, they're not serious enough to be real about it. So no, I don't feel sympathy when people say things like all cops are bastards. Do I think they literally mean 100% every single cop is a terrible person? Look, if you want to strawman people like that, that's cool, but I don't even think that's acting in good faith. I know what they're saying. We know what they're saying. Like you're signing up, and yes, like you're gonna be part of the problem. Yeah, you're gonna do some nice stuff, but the church is the same thing. I think priests can go fuck off because I think they're lying to people. So am I going to say that there isn't some that are nice, that try to help people, that give a person struggling a sandwich or whatever? Yeah, you do nice things, but part of them doing nice things is part of how they keep their power. And so I don't praise them for it, because I know that that's part of how they manipulate the game. So I recognize that they do it, and I say like, oh, okay. But at the same time, I don't give them even credit for it, because most of us who do it, we just do it. We just think it's the right thing to do. They do it, and it's always a means to manipulate. It's always a means to positive PR. It's always a means to more power. So to me, it's like less credible. It's like yeah, you gave a nice person a sandwich, but you gave him a sandwich and then you sat there and proselytized to him. You gave him a sandwich and say, yeah, I've got, I'd love to come have lunch with you once a week, but I need you to come to my church, or whatever the fuck it is. Whereas the rest of us just give them a fucking sandwich, or just say, hey, yeah, I could give you a sandwich, but it kind of sucks to like eat alone all the time. What do you say I come by and have lunch with you once in a while? Just it'll benefit both of us. We can just have a new friend. You know, we just do it because, again, we think it's the right thing to do. But the people who do it as part of their manipulation always want more credit for doing it than the people who just do it because it's the right thing to do. So I get that the cops do great things. And again, I'm one of them people. I'm gonna call the cops. I don't know. I don't know. We're just not there yet. I don't know what else to do, right? If somebody breaks in and I'm scared, I don't have a weapon or whatever. Like I can't imagine a situation where it'd be convenient for me to call the cops. But look, if something gets stolen, I call the cops. I told a story. My moped got stolen. I call the cops. Why? Because you can't even file an insurance claim if you don't call the police. So if your whip gets stolen and you say I'm gonna stand 10 toes down on business, you ain't gonna be able to file an insurance claim. So you're gonna your principles are gonna real quick when you call out the insurance company. Yeah, my car went disappearing from my driver. The first thing they ask you, did you file a police report? Can you give us the report number? So we're just in a world where we have to do that for certain things, but that doesn't mean that that's the world we should live in or the world we want to live in, and that we can't be working towards something best. I do both. I recognize that the system is fundamentally fucked up and broken, and it seems to me, based on the evidence and from all historical indicators, that we really do need a radical reform. We really just need to hit the reset button and do something else. But until we come up with that something else, yeah, if I see somebody break into my neighbor's car, I'm definitely not going to put myself in harm's way. I'm going to dial 911. That's just the reality of the situation. And yeah, that does mean we want cops to be ethical. We want cops to be well screened. We do want good cops. And I said the same thing about talking about Kamala. Like, we want good prosecutors. We want good judges. And we can't keep telling our people we hate you if you go do those things, because then only racist white assholes will be in those positions. And we don't want that either. But in that sense, we just have to walk and chew gum. One thing I'm gonna let you get in, and there's something I want to bring up before I hit play again, because I keep forgetting. Go ahead, my one black friend. Go ahead.
Maybe we can we have an audience here, and these are people with unique experience, and some of them have extraordinary ideas, others just have great ideas. So maybe we can ask them when we come to that point, how would you change the system? What does a new system need in order to benefit the most people, work for the most people, be safe? You know, I've often thought, I've said this on a hot program too, I've often thought that students, when in high school or middle school, you should be educated as to what the laws in your community are. Here's what the law is. Here's the penalty for that. Just so people have a mindset that, hey, I don't want to inadvertently do something wrong. And I sure don't want to do something wrong on purpose if the penalties, you know, if it's harmful to myself or others. I think it's good to get people in that mindset. And to think you're going to pull somebody out of prison after, 15 years and try to convince them of that stuff, good luck. But if you get them while they're young, as they say, and teach them, hey, there's real value to all of us as a community adhering to these things and looking out for each other. There's real value there. Everybody's not going to accept that message. We got to go in knowing that. But what should the message be?
It should be. I think that's the thing, is people don't listen. But a lot of the police abolitionists, they've been saying, first off, you probably don't evaporate policing. Okay. First, let's do a couple of things. One, y'all gotta stop acting like you can't evaporate policing. Again, I'm trying to put this gently, but when I went to Rosetta, when I was lived in that Italian community, there was a 2-car garage for a police department, meaning literally there was no police, y'all. There was no police presence. What I'm really getting at is, when y'all around just y'all, particularly white folks of means, when it's just y'all don't seem to need policing. But then when it comes to living together or living in cities or where we live, You're like, how could you have a community with more than 100 people and not have cops? You have to have cops. You have to have cops. You don't like seeing cops in your neighborhood, though? Let me come out to your neighborhood. Let me come out to your neighborhood where people is making 6 figures plus average household, where the average home is $500,000 or more. You know what you're not going to see a lot of? Cops. Once in a while, you're going to see one ride around the neighborhood, you wave, and that's it.
I moved into that neighborhood where those cops live.
You moving to there? See?
I literally live in that neighborhood. That's
I live above a cop. I'm talking shit about the police, and my neighbor beneath me is a police officer. And he the one that got in trouble for smoking weed in here. He the one. I'm medical. He the one that got in trouble for smoking weed in here. But look, what I'm getting at, y'all, is stop tripping. Stop. Yes, bad things happen, but really we have to stop acting like we can't get along or we can't have a civilization without policing. It literally is possible. Just check yourself when you start acting like they're super necessary. But anyway, like a lot of the people who proposed solutions, they basically proposed like, I don't know what the right word is, but it's like modularity, right? Compartmentalization. Right. So first off, you probably get away from a framing of policing. It's just got like a super bad history. You move to me towards like a frameness of like public safety or something like I would even consider public wellness. Right. And then it's super compartmentalized. Yes, there's probably a SWAT team that, there's a gunman on the loose. You get the SWAT team. Those are the people, this special weapon. And then they have the uber militarized training, and they've really gone through it, right? And so when it's necessary, they're there. But who's running up and down the street giving you parking tickets? It doesn't really need to be the police. It could just be the parking office, right? You just become a parking officer. So they're doing that, and a lot of traffic stuff. A lot of that's automated now. City in Newark, cop ain't gonna pull you over for running through a street light. Like you roll through a red light in the city, you're gonna see a flash right behind you. That's the camera, and you're gonna get an automatic ticket. It's gonna be like, yeah, you ran this light at this corner at this time, and here's the photographic evidence. You can send us your money or appeal if you think it's a problem. And so there's a lot of places where they just don't. And so everything gets broken down. And so the big umbrella is, and then under public safety and public wellness, you could call it, hey, my neighbors are having a bit of a thing. Yeah, hey, hang on. I know one of them kind of has this thing and the other maybe that thing. So, we're going to send over people to help, right? So there's a lot of things we can do. And so I don't want to make it seem like it's all pie in the sky. There are real meaningful steps that we could be taking now to restructuring these departments and really creating a framework that's more helpful. And then what happens, y'all, is actually most of us get behind funding that. See, what was so disappointing about the last thing was we did Black Lives Matter. He got his shirt on. People talked about defund the police, yada, yada, yada. And then people acted like, oh my God, you can't defund the police. And then the police got more money. But if you went in this direction that most of the social scientists and people like that are saying we should go in, you would actually get something that people across the board would be behind funding. Because if we said, yo, we're gonna do more training for police, people are like, oh yeah, I know that costs money. Oh, we're gonna bring on more mental health people so that they can respond when that's appropriate. Oh yeah, I'm down with that. Okay, we're gonna hire like a whole dedicated traffic and parking police, so you don't even deal with police when it comes to little traffic stuff. Oh yeah, we down with that, right? So we can get towards solutions that we can all get behind, and then we can fund those things such that if he still has to be the cop and he's on the SWAT team when he sees a person deformed in an accident or bloodied up in a shootout, he can have time off. Matter of fact, he himself can go to the wellness office and talk to the psychiatrist and the people, right? You see what I'm saying? Like
that day.
Yeah, like that
regardless
day.
of his shift.
Right, and then he gets time off. Yeah, for sure. Now, here's the thing I really wanted to get into that YouTube punk brought up. And yeah, I'm telling you, I use so many streaming softwares. I'm making up features, but they should really have a feature when I click on somebody's name, I should be able to like filter the chat based on like certain users and then only see like what that one particular, right? Because sometimes people's streamers, y'all know what I'm talking about. Sometimes in chat, like people's messages is like a bunch of people who messages get between what somebody's trying to say, or you lose sight of like what like one chatter was saying. So you should just filter based on chatter, right? And then you could just catch up on that person's comments. How, man, I'm making these people money.
Filter like Microsoft Excel.
Yeah, exactly. So but anyway, so YouTube Punk was saying that where he lives, it takes more training to get become certified to do people's hair than it does to become a police officer. And this is one of the problems, and I'm gonna speak it to you like this from the way I see it as an academic. People do see criminal justice as not one of the hardest majors, not one of the most academically rigorous majors. And I'm saying that with caution because I know people who are in criminal justice, I know people in that program, I know scholars and stuff like that. People kind of underestimate it, and I don't want to disrespect them because honestly, I love their shit. And criminology was like my favorite when I was in school. Like that was my favorite class. That shit was crazy. We got to listen. Yo, I could talk about that class. I'm gonna do a stream on that class. The class was so cool. But to his point, it should be one of the hardest. And I really think especially if you say you're interested in actually going into law enforcement versus say like going to law school or something like that. Like it should be one of the hardest majors because you should not only have to know about law enforcement, you should have to learn about all the history. You should have to basically be like a nursing student or something like that because you're going to be involved in emergency situations. You need to know biology, you need to know anatomy, you need to know anatomy and physiology, like all this type of stuff. If it was considered one of the hardest majors instead of one of the easiest majors, that would get rid of a lot of these problems. And then not only that, that should doubly count once it becomes real and you're actually going for the training you need to actually become a cop. I'm just talking about getting a major. I'm talking about just getting a degree. First of all, that should be a thing. Like, I'm done messing around with uneducated cops. Sorry, but you know, how many degrees I had to have to teach at a university? You walk around a goddamn university with a gun. Sorry, bro. You at least need a bachelor's. So because that's we need that so we could get this stuff into them. And then when you go to the actual police academy, oh my goodness, police academy should be like in med school. Like it should be really, really hard because you should really be about that life. You should really have to want to serve, and you should want to know those things. To the little bit that you're going to deal with those things, you should want to know about mental health and how to de-escalate situations. You should want to know about how to render aid and understand how the human body works in case you find yourself in an emergency situation. You should want to know all about social skills and stuff like that so you could be an effective colleague and an effective investigator and communicator and all of this type of shit. You should have to spend tons of time in a community. You should have to know who's who, what's what, how the community is organized, what type of people live here, what their traditions and all that type of shit. Because if you don't know that, you fucking shit up. You fucking shit up. You the one, you said, oh, I saw a bunch of kids doing gang stuff. It's like, bro, they was doing our Day of the Dead fucking Mexican tradition. They were wearing masks and shit because this is a fucking traditional holiday in our community. Yo, dumbass didn't know that because you ain't from around here. But so if I think to YouTube Punk's point, if this was not an easy job to get, right now the pay is real high and the qualifications ain't nearly on point. It need to be a really hard job to get. I think that would solve a lot of it.
You know, it's funny you say that. One of the things I learned early on is being a police officer pays better than being a criminal for most criminals.
Absolutely.
So you're better off instead of being a drug dealer, selling weed, and having to live at your grandma's house or your mom's house. You are better off becoming a police officer and busting, finding the cocaine bust. You're better off writing parking tickets. You're just better off. It's not the way.
Look, YouTube Punk, y'all don't understand. Yeah, YouTube Punk is like one of the anchors of this community, especially behind the scenes. But
what is YouTube Punk's career?
I don't know what
all
YouTube
these great
Punk. I don't know.
insights.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't even know if YouTube Punk has a career. I think YouTube Punk is a wizard. But
Something to do. Wizard's a job.
but nah, YouTube Punk we found some information on an officer that arrested some people in our community. And this stuff is public, and you can see their compensation. And I'm telling you,
Yeah, you can. In California, you can.
Yeah,
you should see what the
California,
top guys are making. It's in the millions. It's in the millions.
But even like a state trooper or something like that, like they make it's a lot of compensation. I'm gonna say this, y'all. If you don't know what these cops is making, be forewarned. It might hurt your feelings. It might hurt.
Yeah, I remember I was in Beverly Hills. I went to a car dealership in Beverly Hills. I think I was there to look at a Lamborghini or something like that, like a Gallardo. That's what I went there, a Gallardo. And they also had like a couple of Aston Martins in there. And I saw these two police officers. And like, this is before I had any concept of what they make. Now, this is Los Angeles. The guy could have inherited a house from someone, didn't need it, sold it off, and just had all this extra disposable income. It's just that way. It's that kind of county. Well, I remember seeing them there, like, what is he looking at? And he's looking at this beautiful, this is in the late 90s, this gorgeous Aston Martin. And I'm going, can he afford that? Because I darn sure couldn't afford the Lamborghini I came to see.
Right. You just hanging, he purchasing.
Oh, if I sold my house, I could have a Lamborghini and an ex-wife. So I'm not interested. I'm not interested in the combo. So I just have to, I'm lucky I have my truck. By the way, I'll send you pictures, pocket locker. But yeah, I wondered, how does he do this? And then someone said cops make a lot of money. I'm like, they do? Yeah.
Yeah.
When I looked into it, I'm like, okay, I could double what I make if I became a police officer. Not the first year, not the second year, but within 6 years, I could double what I make. And if I stay on, it's more than that. Another good career, by the way, if anybody's looking, in many communities, being a firefighter is also an excellent career. I know somebody right now, I got a friend, he retired. His retirement package is like $130K a year. Retirement.
Yeah, that's crazy.
Retired.
Yeah, no, that's
so we're standing in his driveway and we're talking about whatever, about delivering the baby. And he, I know how much he's raking in. He doesn't have to lift a finger for the county anymore, other than keeping his yard pretty. That's it.
Now firefighters, my hat goes off to. That's a tough job. That's a job I don't want. That's a job when it gets real, when them calls come. Woo.
What if?
Good job.
I spent the first year and a half of my daughter's life in an almost daily battle with my own mind. It was a constant onslaught of the most horrible what-if scenarios you can possibly imagine. So bad, I won't even describe them to you. Every night, I had to fight my brain to go to sleep. Breathing exercises, meditations, rain sounds, sleep stories, melatonin, CBD, anything that would just shut the projector off. It's a minor miracle I didn't end up abusing alcohol very much during that time, because some nights a nice big glass of scotch was a really easy way to tell my brain to just shut the fuck up. I was looking into therapy at one point, and then COVID hit, and between that and budget stuff, I basically just gave up on that idea for the time being. After some research, I ended up buying a
It was the same thing. It was the same thing with the Palestine protests.
Key workbook, not that kind, the other kind. And doing exercises in that for a while, and believe it or not, that actually kind of helped. I don't know if it was just feeling like I had some kind of outlet to work on this stuff, or whether I just got less anxious over time as my daughter stayed healthy and happy. But I'm in a much better place than I was 2 years ago. I'll even give you one of my tricks in case you need it. When I catch my thoughts start to race down a bad path and I realize that I'm rehearsing for tragedy, I'll say to myself out loud, "You don't need to rehearse right now. If this ever happens, you'll know what to do." And if the thought is really atrocious, sometimes I will say to myself out loud, "This is a stupid fucking thing to obsess over. We're going to think about a different topic right now." Something about saying it out loud just makes for nice. Sometimes I will say to myself out loud, "This is a stupid fucking thing to obsess over. We're going to think about a different topic right now."
Did y'all hear that, transphobes? I just want all the transphobes. All the transphobes. This is for y'all.
It's really atrocious. Sometimes I will say to myself out loud, this is a stupid fucking thing to obsess over. We're going to think about a different topic right now.
It's okay.
That's pretty powerful. That's pretty powerful.
Yeah. For my transphobes, I need y'all to have that one today. Okay, I need y'all to write that. Remember what they say when you had to use detention? Go ahead, and write that on the board.
On the
40
board.
times. Yeah.
You write that on the board
so you can remember it.
The thing about saying it out loud just makes for a nice thought pattern reboot. I don't know why it works for me, but it does. So why am I telling you all this? Is it to generate sympathy for cops? Absolutely not. ACAB forever. Is it to dissuade young people from going into law enforcement?
He said it to the side.
I'll take
See, it is weird to hear. It is weird to hear a cop say it. But to me, he's doing his best to get with the movement and not take it personally. I feel that.
I think the reason that I wanted to talk about this tonight was as a way of explaining why so many cops behave the way that they do, and why they seem to feel a sense of entitlement about being exonerated after, say, shooting an unarmed person or refusing to run into a school to save children. I am not the only person to have their brain broken by law enforcement, and many of the people to whom that happened are still cops. That hypervigilance, those obsessive thoughts about danger around every corner, that's part of law enforcement culture.
Cheers, gang.
It's part of the training. It's part of the mentoring. It's woven into the DNA of how cops operate every day. That's why there's this almost unbridgeable gulf between a normal person who says something like, "Why did you punch that guy 37 times just for having his hands in his pockets?" and the cop who replies, "Because I didn't know what was in there. It could have been a knife or a gun or a jar of battery acid that he was going to throw in my face. I didn't want to take the chance." I guarantee you.
Yeah. This is literally right. The cop was telling him, Massey, he shot her and then was like, "I'm not going to have somebody throw hot boiling water on me." That's that gap. That's that gulf he talking about. Bro, why did you shoot that woman in the face that you told to go over to her stove to turn that off? I'm not gonna have somebody throw hot water in my face. Oh, well, all right. That is an explanation. That is an explanation.
Seminar one time where some old head was telling a war story about his partner Bob Sacamano, who actually did get battery acid thrown in his face. There are approximately 900,000 police officers.
Hey, YouTube punk, that's on me, bro. I didn't set up the sound for the store in the studio. I'm gonna do it and then announce it.
And I'm willing to bet that the vast majority of them were trained like I was and have the same.
Sorry, YouTube punks, my bad.
That's a lot of unarmed, unaccountable people running around fantasizing about being executed in the streets every day. And yeah, this may inspire some sympathy in you for those cops. I don't think it's a coincidence that cops endure this kind of abusive working mode and then turn to alcohol abuse and even more notoriously, child abuse and intimate partner abuse. Yes, many people who are already abusive enter law enforcement because the profession protects abusers, but I do think that the job can, over time, make people much more abusive than they were when they started, both through the training and through the peer pressure. Counseling and therapy are totally stigmatized in law enforcement. If your department finds out that you're receiving mental health treatment, you risk missing out on special assignments and promotions for being unstable.
All right, there's a lot there, and I think when you think about abuses in the church, it's the same thing. Where yes, there are abusers and terrible people who seek out professions where they're going to get more power and access and protection and be able to get away with their abuse. And then you have the fact that that type of power dynamic, that type of position can be a corrupting influence over and above whatever was there to begin with. And then the fact that they stigmatize and look down upon, active, proactive, real mental health treatment. And I literally think that's the same thing in the church, where everything's a sin problem and a spiritual problem and a leadership problem and a headship problem. It's never you're a fucking psychopath problem and never ever a crime, because it's usually should be this is a criminal problem. But yeah, it's the same. It's the same thing with cops, right? They don't take it seriously. They don't want anybody to, tough it out. You're not stable or whatever. If you try to get, like we said, you see some horrible shit and you're supposed to just roll through it and keep working and not take any time off to deal with it. But then all of a sudden, when there's real issues and all this crazy stuff is happening, they don't want to take accountability for that. It's a real issue.
So everyone fighting these demons is fighting alone. But I'm not arguing for sympathy, and I'm not asking you to empathize with anyone. Instead, all of this is yet another reason why I am a police abolitionist, and why I believe that the profession, as it exists today, cannot be reformed into something better and must instead be replaced. The hundreds of thousands of cops with these hyper-vigilant, alarmist thought patterns are not going to be receptive to being disarmed and trained not to kill. Hell, when I was a cop, even in my later nice cop years, I wouldn't have been receptive to being part of an unarmed community service role. I would have balked at any training that said that police should err on the side of not killing someone during a tense, uncertain, rapidly evolving situation. I would have told you that it was dangerous to dissuade cops from killing because it means that they will hesitate when that day comes.
See, that is a lot of the bullshit. And there's a lot of where you think the system is broken. That's where you say you need fundamental reform, because and again, I literally feel the same way about Christians. They're always so fascinated in things when it's wrapped in the Christian flag, when it's look at the trees, how great is our God, oh my God, God made all this, isn't it wonderful? And it's like, oh, you want to learn how the world works? Oh, you're really fascinated by life? You think how life works? Here, let's hit up this biology textbook. You want to take a biology class? Oh, no, is it right? Like, they don't want the real. When it comes to doing the real, they're not interested. They're busy. Oh, they got somewhere else to be, right? And I don't think that's true of all cops, but this is a big part of the problem. Give them the job we want them to have. Give them the job where they're not able to walk around with a gun. They don't have immunity. They don't have any sort of presumptive legal shield, but they're just here to protect and serve. They're roping off the parades. They're making sure the protesters don't break curfew, right? All this old bullshit. And all of a sudden they quit en masse. All of a sudden, they don't even want to do that job. And that tells you that to them, the job really is about cowboying up, carrying the gun, and when it's on and popping, y'all shoot first. Because when you tell them, here's what public safety looks like when it's done in the interest of public safety, fuck that, man. I'm going back to, but that's what we want. That's why I say do it. Again, make it a hard major. Make police academy a for real academy, like one of the hardest, extracurricular trainings you could go through. And then really, like, if your job ain't got nothing to do with really interacting with armed people on a day-to-day basis like that, you don't get a gun. You don't get a weapon, you get maybe a little taser or something to protect yourself in the worst case scenario. And it is primarily a desk job and about walking around in these communities and knowing what's going on and keeping everything orderly and keeping everything safe. And all of a sudden, 80% of y'all don't want to do the job. Cool. That's the 80% of the people we don't want to be cops anyway. But it's very fascinating how you make it a job that's safe for us and all of a sudden they don't want to do it.
Any training or policy that put civilian lives ahead of police officer lives would have been killed off by a massive mobilization of angry officers. Among the 900,000 cops out there, are there caring, compassionate officers who just want their community to be safe? Sure. Would some of them make amazing community care responders and conflict mediators and mental health crisis counselors? Absolutely.
Exactly.
These officers are
that's your people, my one black friend. Don't worry, we got
those
jobs
are my
for
people.
Y'all. We got jobs for y'all.
I would say, and again, I'm still thinking of moving. This might be something I would see if that's available in Houston. Like, you know what? I'll do that. Because I would say, look, if we're the first responders now, and we're trying to settle this all like adults without brutalizing each other, without the need for a physical self-defense, when our methods are exhausted and we just can't come up with a resolution, we thank the people for their time and we leave. And then the guys with the guns who can handle the escalation, then they show up. Someone doesn't want to come along peacefully. Thank you for your time. I'm not into being super aggressive. Another group comes along, they are. I'm all for de-escalation because most things, and I've seen plenty of these videos where things get out of hand. A lot of it comes down to just the officer in authority being able to admit they were wrong. Rather than now I was wrong, but now I have to find something so I don't look silly to this person. No, that's not necessary. You know what? Because I've had officers tell me, "Oh, please be on your way. Drive safely." Because I'm not wrong. I'm not in the wrong. And that officer, all they did was they just made a miscalculation. It happens. People aren't going to be angry about an interaction that just ends like that. But when it's now I got to search your car. Now I got to ask you what you had for dinner. Now I got to ask you when the last time you picked your nose. Now I got to ask you about when they start getting into the history and just drawing it out like, look, I really just want to go pee. Oh, now I can't let you go pee.
Yeah. And that's what I saw.
Go ahead.
I was just gonna say that's what I saw with Sonia Massey. Like she had called them, whatever. She heard something. They looked around. They didn't hear it. They didn't see it. It should have been done. There was no need to even go in her house, but it literally felt like that was too boring to them. They wasted all this, like they wasted all this time coming over here to see what was going on. It was nothing. And then they literally started looking for stuff. Well, so can I see your ID? Oh, now I'm worried about the stove. Next thing you know, she's dead. And it's crazy. Like it's lethal that cops who literally the guys we want who just show up at your house, you say like, yo, something spooked me. I don't know what it was. Like something spooked me. Whether it's there or not, something spooked you. So you call the cops. That's probably the smart thing to do. But they come over and they want, oh, great, good news. There's nothing. Don't worry about it. Hey, yeah, so you hear it again, give us a call, man. We'll see it next time. Right? That's what a service mentality looks like. Those cops they're bored. They don't want to do that.
We'll keep someone in the neighborhood nearby.
Yeah.
And if it happens again, we'll have someone who's able to respond within minutes.
No, they were disappointed. They were
or seconds.
They wanted some action, and there wasn't any on offer.
My point being is that's one way to deal with the situation. A better way might be if it's like a single woman who's 96 pounds and has 2 children in her house, leave the cruiser right there in front of that house. Have another one show up, then another one show up. So whoever is trying to bug this person realizes, you know what, they're willing to respond in a way that I couldn't possibly deal with all those people if the person's nefarious. I couldn't deal with all those police officers. I can't rebut such a show of force. Let me just be on my way. Whatever the solution is. If an officer's driving through a neighborhood and there's a bunch of kids playing and the ball goes into the street or the kids are already playing in the street, maybe the best thing that can happen is that officer stop their car, get out, and flag cars down coming the other way. Like, you slow down. And then get the kids out of the street. Cars goes by and the kids go right back into the street. Just so those kids grow up knowing they're looking out for us. And the same will happen. They will look out for the officer as well. Maybe it's 1,000 little things like that that end up building the best possible communities. But the brutality that we do see certainly isn't a solution. The I've never been a soldier, right? I didn't sign up to be a Marine. I didn't want to hurt anybody. That's why I didn't do it. I had the recruiter come to my house though. But ultimately I didn't do it. There have to be people who will take up the mantle to look out for other people at personal risks. I have friends, one of my friends I went to college with, he went into criminal justice and became an officer after he graduated. He not only puts his life in danger to preserve the safety of others, there's a second component where he has to be willing to harm others, right? He can make that leap in his mind, whereas I couldn't. I don't want to hurt anybody for any reason. I don't want to swing my fist at anyone. That's just not me. My wife, she comes from a communist country. One of the things she's most excited about being an American is she can have a gun, because where she's from, she can't. So I talked to some of my police officer friends and sheriff department friends. Not a single one of them turned it down. When she's ready, we'll take her to the gun range. We'll train her how to properly use that firearm. And my friend who's he's a competitive shooter, I'll train her too. So I can take her around to all the other guys first and have them show her what to do. And then she can go see him so she can rise to a level if she wants to, where she can compete. But there has to be those people who will go a step beyond where I'm willing to go, to look after the people in my family and community. I don't want to shoot someone. I'm probably not gonna. I'll sit there and listen as they tell her what to do. I'm probably not gonna pick up a gun and become as capable as she is. It's just unlikely.
Yeah, I think people are weirdly obsessed with guns. Kind of a weird. I think our culture is just becoming. It's MAGA brain is one of the weird exports.
MAGA brain.
It was nice. It was nice when our country was exporting jazz, and you go around the world and you go to Spain and you're playing jazz. Like, oh yeah, oh we love this jazz from America, But like when people thinking that, like, we're going to America so I can fire. Like, look, we good. We safe. You're supposed to come to America because it's safe here. You're supposed to come to America because it's safe here and you don't need a gun. But I'm with it. I'm with her because that's where we're at. People are just obsessed with guns and like they love them and see them on TV. And was sexual.
They're certainly not.
I think I think part of it'd be interesting to see what the studies say on this, because surely there must be some. I think part of the attraction of gun ownership, because I'm into cars. I'm guilty of this, although I don't have a vehicle like this yet. I'm building one. My Firebird, when it's done, it's a '69 Firebird for those who want to know. It'll have about 600 horsepower roughly, because I'm building it to race in autocross competitions. I'm not building it to go get groceries. I'm building it for that, and that's even more power than I need for that. My truck, which is getting close to being finished, has about half that amount of horsepower, maybe less. It fully is capable of doing the exact same thing, racing in autocross, as the Firebird. But I would love it if it also had 600 horsepower, not so that I could use it, just so it was there. And I hear that a lot in the muscle car community. Oh, I just love that it's there, when people were buying 700 plus horsepower Dodge Hellcats and Mustang Cobras that had over 700 horse. I just like that it's there. A lot of those cars never get raced. A lot of those cars never use 3/4 of or even half of that horsepower. People just like the fact that it's there. There are gun owners that want the gun for protection. They don't want to be like my friend who competes, right? He can probably outshoot every police officer and sheriff's officer in my neighborhood. Absolutely. I wouldn't even bet against him. but that's why he has a gun. He liked it that he got pretty good at shooting it, and he was like, I'll just make sure I get to a high level of proficiency with my firearm. Now he's also interested in law enforcement, but I gotta tell you, he used to work for me. He's not someone who's going to take his gun out just for the fun of shooting someone.
Yeah,
He
no,
doesn't
I
even,
know.
he doesn't
I know.
hunt. He doesn't hunt. And I have hunters in my family. They love that stuff.
I know sports shooters. I know somebody's like in the U.S. Shooting program,
Okay.
but even them, like it's confined to a range. Like I don't, I just don't think it's a thing that I would take everybody's guns. You could have it. You could
take all the guns.
You could take it at the
Okay.
cabin. You could have it at the cabin if you go shoot. You can go to a gun range. I'm not taking away. I'm not removing them from society from areas where they're appropriate. And I honestly, I probably don't even care if you get a hunting license and then you can like keep a hunting gun in a locked cabinet at your home, or if you're a sports shooter, you get a license that says you can keep a locked one. But no one has a handgun, access to a handgun for self-defense in Jay's universe. And everybody just, what happens to everybody? They just get over it. And actually, to be honest with you, nobody even bitches about their right to the Second Amendment because we just got rid of that shit. Like literally, I became president. I put both houses of Congress in the same room. I said, come up with a new constitution that doesn't have a Second Amendment in it. They thought I was kidding. They eventually realized the fastest thing to do was just take the Constitution we had, strike out the Second Amendment, and call it a day. And that's exactly what they did. Gonzo Dunzo. So, no, Sumami, I wouldn't have to kill you to take away your handgun. I would just have to become the leader of the free world, make myself a dictator for a day, Donald Trump style, and then I could take away your handgun after I'd already suspended democracy for a day and taken away all your other rights.
Sumami, look for your Target gift card for $315 for turning in your firearm. Your Target gift card.
No, I love the buybacks. I really do like buybacks.
I think the buyback is a great idea because you have a lot of people who their spouse died, and that's the only reason they still have a gun. So okay, well, I might as well get something out of this. Let me take my Target gift card and get things I actually need and get rid of this gun or these guns. We have my father was in World War II and he was in Okinawa building airstrips over there. One of the things he brought back was a Japanese rifle from this. So this thing is bounced from person to person in my family. I don't want it. I've seen it. I just have no interest in it. But there are people who have a gun for that reason. I sort of get it. I wouldn't personally want to take that away from them. No, it's really an heirloom, and it doesn't, you're not going to shoot that at somebody. You're just not. Or if you did, you really had to, right?
Yeah, but you can declare that a sport thing or whatever, and even then you'd have to keep it. It has to be locked cabinet, safe, display thingy. It's not. Well,
you can decommission it.
It's not you register it as an heirloom, and then all of a sudden, somebody broke into my house, and I just happen to have that heirloom resting under my pillow, fully loaded, like a, yeah.
Well, look, somebody breaks in your house. There isn't just one way to take care of that.
The senator from California convinced me we could put the heirlooms in there. You can have the heirlooms. They don't.
You're welcome, America. You're welcome. You're welcome.
Federal policy, and they are not leading the culture of modern American law enforcement. They exist, but they are not representative of the whole of policing. And when you call 911, there's a low likelihood that you're going to get officer friendly instead of Sergeant Dick rifle. From the frequent police murders of unarmed civilians.
Wait, hang on. I need to hear what he said about this.
Federal policy. And this
he changed. I think he did a whole different clip. He changed outfits or something.
Police officer lives would have been killed off by a massive mobilization of angry officers. Among the 900,000 cops out there.
So what he's saying is that cops oppose any of these efforts to hold them more accountable, and they would revolt even at an effort that says that they had to put protecting civilian lives ahead of protecting police lives.
Are there caring, compassionate officers who just want their community to be safe? Sure. Would some of them make amazing community care responders and conflict mediators and mental health crisis counselors? Absolutely. But these officers are not driving department policy. They're certainly not driving federal policy, and they are not leading the culture of modern American law enforcement. They exist, but they are not representative of the whole of policing. And when you call 911, there's a low likelihood that you're going to get officer friendly instead of Sergeant Dick rifle.
Okay. That I think was an excellent point. And I think that's kind of what I was getting at earlier, though he said it way more eloquently than I did, which is just that, and I feel the same way about the church. When I say I don't buy allyship from Christians, this is what I mean. It's not that I don't believe there are. I know there are good people that sincerely love everybody and they just want their neighbor to be safe and happy because that's what it means to follow Jesus. But those people are not leading the charge of Christianity. They're not. They're usually not in positions of leadership, even within their own churches. Nevertheless, thought leaders for the faith, right? And so when you look at that institutional level, when you look at who's leading Christian institutions, who's leading churches, their political influence or social influence, who are most of their media influences, right? It's very clear that by and large, the bulk of those people are incredibly problematic. And so it ends up with those ones. And I feel sympathy for them. I feel bad for them in that sense, in a sense, doing a bit of, PR for the others. And it's like attention. They also do feel a bit like betrayed. They feel like those people are giving them a bad rap. I know this. I worked at a prosecutor's office and it was very much the same thing. Like I thought for me, it was worth it because, there's prosecutorial discretion and the prosecutor's office does have a role to play in making sure, there are just outcomes in the system. But it's also the reality, and this is something, people who are conscientious about these things have reasoned disagreements about. It's also the case that they're fighting an uphill battle because you're not the level of the filter. You're so down the line that by the time that the case gets to you, you have a limited ability to really make change. So we could, sort of not be racist. And to put this simply, like, think of it like we cannot be racist in how we prosecute people. And I would argue that's a huge thing and a step in the right direction. And I had other things I wanted to do, like effectively decriminalize marijuana by just like not prosecuting petty drug crimes. But at the same time, you can't control how racist the system of who leads to who even gets prosecuted to begin with is, right? And that's where that disagreement comes in. If you guys listen to like Ole Laurinati or whatever, I forget the name of her channel, but she's a Caribbean public defender from New York City. She works out of New York City, and she talks about this. And she talked about this with like Kamala.
Frequent police murders of unarmed
She's not Caribbean. I forget what country she's from.
Civilians, to the now frequent refusal of police to defend school children, it's painfully obvious that the American officer safety mindset is a clear and present threat to everyone in this country. Anytime you're within 20 feet of a cop, you are in danger, both from their overactive imagination and from their total systemic insulation from consequences. You should never feel safe when the cops arrive, unless you're rich and white. Anyway, a weirdly personal one tonight. What do you think? I'm sure those of you with CPTSD can probably relate to the racing thoughts and hypervigilance. What techniques work for you? Also, how do you like these little low-key, kind of sloppy vlogs as opposed to my more researched, more complex topics? Let us know in the comments. As always, please slap the old like.
All right, gang. I liked it. I thought it was really I thought it was insightful. I thought he let us in on a lot of stuff. I'm glad he's gone through this journey. Uh, I hope he finds a way to get organized. I hope he finds a way to, you know, start an organization with like other police officers and raise more awareness about this type of thing. I'm sure he could probably join forces with some of those January 6th people who have been, you know, speaking out about what's going on with them. So, yeah. What did you think of the video?
I think as a snapshot. I'm not willing to say that his experience is an outlier. I do wonder with that sort of training, if you aren't producing tens of thousands of people with this mindset, but most know how to handle it. I think a lot of the video games we have these days, with like the first person shooter kind of games, I wonder how, if something like that could be useful with training officers, or is there something like that in place already? I
No, I
know
think
they've
there's too
had like,
many of those guys. I think that's the problem. Too many of our cops
well,
they're like those Call of Duty guys who grew up in
well, I don't know how
police
many of
officers.
those. Look, how many of those Call of Duty guys are Marines, right?
Not many. Yeah, I would say way more of them became cops than became Marines. That's probably for sure.
Okay, because I'd be willing to bet, doggone it, the Marines should, if they became Marines. My brother, when I didn't, I told the Marine recruiter, come on this day, come on this day. This is back when I was in high school. And I was too young, so my mom would have had to sign up for me. And I'm like, I don't know if I want to go to college. You go in the armed forces. Dad was in the armed forces. A lot of people I respected were. So I did a lot of thinking about it, and the recruiter was coming. I told my mom, you know what? I got to go off to work. Just tell him I decided not to do it. But my brother David was home, and he started talking to the Marine recruiter, and he signed up. When I came home from work, they were still sitting there. I'm like, I thought they'd be done by now. And he said, guess what? I'm a Marine. And I was looking terrified. And the recruiter's like, hey. And I was like, hi. So my brother went off and had a pretty good career with the Marines and did all the stuff I was afraid to do, and became good at some of the stuff I was afraid to become good at. One of them is firearms. Um, but he met his wife through being in the military. One of his sons has followed his footsteps. My brother went from the Marines to the Navy, that sort of thing. So now he's got a career going in the Navy. So there is some, I guess one of the hurdles that we have to realize is the training. Another one of the hurdles that the police face is rooting out the bad apples. You're not going to catch them all. It's not that you don't make a point that policies need to change, Pocket Locker. I don't think getting rid of the guns solves all the problems, because you're still going to have people who abduct children, right? You're still going to have people who are cult leaders on the dangerous side. They're going to have guns anyway.
But again, don't
You're
hold
still
me to
going to have
that. Don't hold me to a straw man. I didn't say I was solving getting rid of all crime and making no bad guys. And if you really care about people kidnapping children and doing all the other monstrous examples we can name, I say getting rid of a mass supply of legal firearms is a huge step in the right direction. And I don't know how anybody who's familiar with the data can argue otherwise. And even the people who say, well, I have to have a gun because I got to protect myself. Yeah, well, you'd have to protect yourself from a lot less if it wasn't so easy for everybody to have guns. And then if on top of it, whatever else you were going to do, break into a store, rob somebody, whatever it's going to be, you were facing a serious felony gun charge on top of it. So all I'm saying is it helps a lot. And then again, it also helps the cops, because part of the thing now is, and again, a lot of this is just travel, y'all. Just travel, because you're gonna go to really advanced European societies that are every bit as westernized and technology driven, whatever you want as America, and you're gonna be like, oh, they don't let people own guns here. Oh, and society hasn't collapsed. And y'all got to just put that on as an honest data point. Like, yo, shit will be okay without the guns. Like, people get okay. So now that the citizens don't have guns in their socks, okay, now you can de-escalate the police force. Now, not all the police need to have guns. And notice, I never said there's no guns anywhere. I literally said the military can have their guns. People have guns if you're in the sport. You can have guns when you hunt. You can have your family heirloom gun. And also the police have weapons. They just don't all have them. It is a special weapon, right? There's a lot of weapons. If I say the word weapon, there's a lot of things. A gun is a special weapon. Why? Because it's a specially lethal weapon. And so it requires a lot of special extra training. And it's not just how to use the gun. It's not just how to point the gun and aim and all and maintain the gun and all that stuff. It's a lot of the psychological stuff of the pressure cooker of being in combat, essentially, when lethal force is required. And again, it's based on the data. What does the data show us? It shows us most cops ain't ready for that. Most of y'all are up to the task. If it's woo, 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 pull over, you were going too fast. But if it's really all of this, you know, you got most cops are just not ready for that. So again, all I'm saying, both from a public safety and a policing perspective, is it's really better if we keep that stuff to people who are overtrained. And again, like, I want the former Marines because again, this is when the domestic stuff really is getting militarized, and you really do want people who are really, really built like that in this situation. What I'm saying is Joe Blow cop who really should be helping you get your cat out of the tree, he don't need them same type of things. And again, he would need it way less if he wasn't worried that all the citizens have them. So that's my you know, thoughts on that. But I think a big part of the problem is everybody wants to have it. We just gotta, sometimes you gotta admit you're wrong. We were wrong. First off, the Second Amendment doesn't
I've said that already.
The Second Amendment does not protect your right to have a firearm to protect yourself. That's not what the Second Amendment is for. So when people even come to me like, oh, it's really not. That's what the Second Amendment is about. In order to maintain a well-regulated militia, it says that right up front. So you wanting a gun to feel safe has nothing to do with the Second Amendment. So really, it's literally just a matter of law. Is it legal? Are we a country that's going to make it legal to own firearms or not? And I think people keep talking about, all I'm saying is stop crying about the gun violence. We are in a suicide pact. It is just a matter of time before there's a mass shooting at your university, your workplace, your grocery store, your nightclub, your church, because y'all don't want to get rid of the guns. Other countries have tried the same experiment. And you know what? After a mass shooting, even the UK, after a mass shooting, they're like, sorry, we're done. No more handguns. That's what they're like. Oh, so y'all want to have both. Y'all want to have guns everywhere, and then at the same time, y'all want to be horrified and oh my God, how could we have these mass? Oh my God. Nah, I don't cry no tears. I cry no tears over mass shootings. Expect them to happen. So, but yeah, that's just me. But I'm like you, my one black friend. I don't have one, right? So I don't have one. I don't want one. You know, I think they're cool. Like, don't get me wrong. People get this twisted too. I actually think guns are cool. But I think that from like it's a machine I'm fascinated with. Same way I think rockets are cool. Yeah, I would read a book about how rockets work. I would watch a TV show. I used to watch a show called Tales of the Gun, right? Because if I watch a show about how they put a rocket in space, oh, that's pretty interesting. Oh yeah, how does an AK-47 work? That's very interesting to me. Like, I think from that perspective, it's like just something to be interesting and like how it works and like the role different weapons have played throughout history. Oh, that's cool. And a lot of these games, I think these games are great. But nothing in me desires to actually own an automatic rifle or even a handgun. And then the other thing is, I do have, mental health stuff. I've been involuntarily committed. So interestingly, when it comes to the right to own a firearm, the only people who advocate for me to have a right to own a firearm are the real far right, like everybody should be able to have guns.
Should be given one when you're born.
Extremists, right? Yeah, because everybody else wants background checks and red flag laws and all of that stuff. So they literally want to say to me, Jay, you should fight for me you should agree I have the right to have a gun, but you don't have a right to have. I'm not going to fight for y'all to have a right to do something I don't do. So me personally, if it really, really is supposed to be everybody has the right to have a gun because you need to protect yourself, then I should have one too. I should have that. I should have one too, because you might say, "Oh, well, Jay, you have a mental thing." Who gives a fuck? Fuck you. Fuck you. I take my meds. I see my psychiatrist. My shit is regulated. I'm good. And matter of fact, there's a solution to that. My psychiatrist would sign off on that shit. I could get my psychiatrist to sign off on it. I should get my lawyer to sign off. They'd be like, "Oh yeah, Mr. Bundy is absolutely no threat to anybody. Let him have a handgun." Yeah, but y'all don't want to hear that. Oh, they don't want to have that conversation. They just want to be able to say, "Oh no, you have a thing." So then what y'all really want is this social credit system. Who's in the club, who's on the list, that they get the full rights and everything. But everybody else, well, no, because you're too much of a risk. So again, if it's really supposed to be everybody has a right to have one, because I got to tell you something. If you're really worried about predators, then I know who to go after. Oh, I know so-and-so is in my neighborhood. I know he had a thing. He was in the hospital. Well, now I know who to victimize. People already know. You go after the weak, you go after the deviant, and you go after the people who you know can't they can't own a gun. So now you're gonna put a target on me. Make me the easy target.
Alpha and Omega Ministries says the Second Amendment allows for Alpha and Omega to have surface-to-air missiles. No. Technically, it does say arms. So I suppose I'm wrong there. I'm the unreasonable one. Oh, that's a valid point, though.
That's how
can't argue with it.
That's how a lot
That's
of
a valid point. Because you can be sure somebody during pre-Civil War days, they're regular people that owned cannons. They had a farm or whatever. They probably owned a. There's that oddball guy.
But honestly, that is in a sense more aligned with the Second Amendment to say, well, if the government gets tyrannical, they got nukes. So how are you going to maintain because you remember the whole well-regulated militia thing? Now it's to protect in case the government goes rogue or a rogue government comes in and the government don't know what to do to keep its shit together, and y'all got to handle this, right? So our enemies, both foreign and domestic, have nukes. So now what? Now I gonna have to. So people who make that argument, it's a silly argument. I'm definitely never gonna sign off on anybody having nukes or automatic rifles or none of that. But yeah, that is where they're coming from. So yeah, it's quite interesting. Oh, there was something else, and it's like slipping my mind now. I can't remember if it was a gun thing or a cop thing. I'm gonna remember as soon as it's too late.
So maybe we could look at our audience now, Pocket Locker, in the time we have left. We have like 9 minutes left. Reforming the system. What are some ideas for reforming the system? How can we have better policing?
Well, one idea. So I talked about compartmentalization. I think that's a really thing. First of all, I think I think you rebrand it. I think you do recognize the historic, and it's almost, I hate to say this, y'all, it's almost a symbolic gesture, but a meaningful one. Is to say we need a different institution. And yes, public safety and to an extent law enforcement is going to be part of that institution, but that's not going to be the whole institution. And so then I do think you don't call it police, because you have to, one that allows you to, it allows you to get a clean start somewhat, right? And to also cast all the sins, so to speak, onto the old institution. Just acknowledge that yes, this old institution, it was racist, it was involved in the slave catching in the history. So it can take the history, right? It can take the historical problems, and it can take the current problems. And there's systematic injustice, and the police not trained enough, and there's too much brutality, right? So you take it all and just lump all and say we're going to do something new, right? And so then now you have this department of and I would call it like public wellness, even, because even I think public safety reads law enforcement too easily, because everything becomes safety, maybe wellness, but something like that, right? Public safety, public wellness, and then again it becomes a big tent, and the police are part of that. And here's another key: they're not the top of that, they're not in charge. It isn't really a police department with all of these other things all underneath it. It's really a department of all these other things, and law enforcement is just one of those departments. And then I think that gets you specialized people to do a lot of because you do a lot of the traffic stuff, a lot of that. So technology helps, the AI, the cameras, a lot of that stuff helps, because again, for people like me, a lot of it is police or harassment, right? And a lot of it it starts with basic stuff. So like a lot of times we talk about over policing and there's too many Black people in prison, but how do they get there? Well, they get there because they pull us over all the goddamn time. You see what I'm saying? So even though it seems like traffic stops and that type of thing is low level and simple, believe it or not, that's really where a lot of the problem starts. So to me, it's great that the cameras now take care of citations for running red lights, because now I'm not worried about a racist cop pulling me over. I'm actually worried about not running the goddamn light. So I think that's a big help. Another one, though, is get rid of the guns. Get rid of the guns, because again, it reduces just the amount of violent and gun-related crimes, but it also reduces the need and demand for all these police to have guns, and that eliminates a lot of unnecessary police shootings. Police shootings wouldn't happen if police didn't have guns. And again, most of the time when we're worried about it, what is it? It's a police shooting an unarmed person. So don't tell me the police needed to have the gun in the situation. They didn't, because the other person wasn't armed. So again, so I think that's part of it. But yeah, let's see what y'all talking about in this chat.
Yeah, I want to kick it off with Sumami's reply about my canon comments. Where is it? It's something about Grandpappy or something like that. Pappy, the cannon needs a lubing down again. In my countryman voice. Thank you, sir. It's a shame we can't have people call in and say the comments themselves.
Well, we could do that at some point. We could do a call in. We can do. They could restream. But Rochester said private prisons were the worst idea in history. Yes. Oh, now I remember the thing I wanted to bring up. We got to stop with the propaganda. So one thing I think is interesting is I don't see military recruiters the same way you used to. And I think part of that is we have a sort of different taste towards them, recruiting people in the military. I'm not saying that doesn't mean we want people serving, but I think we feel differently about them so actively trying to entice people into serving in the military. And so I think the same way, I wouldn't really put a lot of emphasis on doing like commercials to join the military in the militarization of like sporting events and stuff. Like I would get rid of that. And I think that would take care of some of the policing, but I would put policing in there too. Like I would not be advertising for policing jobs on TV or having recruiters on campus trying to recruit people into law enforcement. I think it could just be seen as those things are under the government and it's distasteful for the government to do those things. Those things are there. We know they're there, but we don't glorify them in the sense that make them more attractive to the wrong people. And again, you will go to other civilized countries and realize they got plenty of cops, plenty of military people. They don't have to make multi-million-dollar commercials to recruit them on TV. They just see that as being in poor taste.
Okay. YouTube Punk says abolish qualified immunity.
Sir,
Now,
that's a huge
what
one.
this is, as long as an officer does not violate a person's human rights, they have immunity with what they do. I do think qualified immunity goes too far because it's basically saying almost anything that person does is permissible. That's not okay. That's why the police were called to begin with, isn't it? Because somebody else thought that was true. Everything they do is okay.
There's no need for immunity at all. Everybody is equal under the eyes of the law. That's it. You got to be able to do your job within the confines of the law. Because if it's ever anything, see, there's a difference between qualified immunity and the benefit of the doubt. When the rubber meets the road, it was a bang bang moment, split thing decision. The cop made a choice. It just so happened it was the wrong choice or whatever. They're gonna still get the benefit of the doubt if they were really doing their job, really acting in good faith, and didn't do anything else that was like a violation of the procedure and protocol. We're not going to just start locking up cops for human error. Trust me. But the idea that we presume them to be legally innocent, there's no need for that. There's really just no need for that. In my opinion, that's my take on it. But YouTube Punk, that's huge. That's huge. Yeah, I think that's a big one.
All right, so police must carry in. I'm probably skipping something. Let me see. Alpha and Omega dog. However, the first use of United States militias by President Washington after the Revolutionary War was to quell the Whiskey Rebellion. And I can't see the rest of that comment.
This is an interesting one. Prison labor, like the government loves using prison labor. I don't know if it's just like making prison labor illegal or making it so that it's not devalued so much so that it just becomes something people don't see as attractive. But I do think even though I don't think it's having as much of an impact, say like on like a cop on the streets or whatever, when it comes to systematic reform, I definitely think the way we use prisoners as a cheap labor force is a big exploitation. And it's again a systematic issue. And there's a lot of institutions, again, there's a lot of people running private prisons or involved in the prison industry that are making a lot of money, especially on those contracts and those deals. Like the deals to set those things up are incredibly lucrative and stuff. So again, it's another one of those things where if it wasn't there, we would get a lot of the bad eggs out of the business because they wouldn't have this, this wouldn't be so profitable to exploit.
Police must carry personal insurance to be employed. I do like that idea.
Personal
I do like that
insurance.
idea because the fact I'm a big fan of Dusty Smith, so I watch his Cult of Dusty podcast or listen to it. I rarely watch any podcast, but I listen to it, and he will talk about this sometimes. Like police should be required to carry insurance, and he'll make and he's not being funny. He's saying like, oh, the police will just investigate themselves and find out they did nothing wrong. but the person that was assaulted or wrong, they'll get millions of dollars in a lawsuit, and you and I will pay for it. Now, that's really strong, valid criticism, in that, yeah, there's one individual or maybe two cops that stepped out of line. Their pension isn't attached, right? They don't risk losing part of their pension to the person that they violated the rights of. They don't, but maybe they should. And that way, there's skin in the game for them, right? If the county's just going to pay for it, they're going to lose their job, but 2 counties away will hire them, and it's only an extra 15-minute drive or 20-minute drive for them to
I think he froze on my end.
within the tri-state area must be willing to say, we won't hire you. Or if you've had one of these, no state in the country can hire you. We just won't have you. Like, this is unacceptable everywhere, not just in the community. You just had to leave. So
Right.
maybe those things could go hand in hand.
So it said neither slavery nor involuntary servitude except as a punishment for crime whereof the party shall have been duly convicted shall exist within the United States or any place subject to jurisdiction. So people don't realize this, which is that we literally made an exception to slavery for prison. And people quickly realized, oh, hey, we could still exploit Negro labor if they're just happen to be convicted of a crime and therefore they're a prisoner. And what do you know? Prison started swelling with black people. I don't know. Maybe it's just a coincidence. Maybe it's just a coincidence. But it really, there really is this situation where you have to understand that there is always a very powerful white supremacist power core in America that has no interest in black people beyond slavery. It was never interested in us truly being free. Okay, if I can't enslave you, then let me imprison you. That way I can actually enslave you. If I can't do that, then let me segregate everything. We'll talk about separate but equal, and then we'll just make sure, well, we have the really nice water fountains and y'all have some pond or whatever to drink out of, and we'll say, well, they have water. And then, because really what it is it's like, why they see us, to see us as equals is to allow us to compete. And they know they don't want more competition. They've never wanted more competition. Their whole system is built on their economic insecurity, right? So it's I don't know. It's just something that, again, people who don't really get serious about reforming the system are often overlooking these historical trends in the system, and the fact that what we see today, vis-a-vis massive over-incarceration, mass incarceration, particularly of people of color, is not a new thing. It's the way it's always been, and it's still happening. And effectively, if people are okay with this, if you think it's okay that, prisoners who are making literally, less than a quarter an hour or whatever the hell it is, are making your license plate or your fabric or whatever the hell, then there's like something wrong with us. There's like very much something wrong with us. We've got to ask ourselves, why do we think committing a crime makes it okay to be enslaved?
Let's take the prisoner labor thing. We got other comments I'd love to get to, but I never thought of this until now. If you take that same imprisoned person and say, look, we can give you a job while you're in prison. You will earn, let's just say it's minimum wage. You will earn minimum wage. And when you get out, you're going to get a check for that money. So when you start over, you don't start over broke. You have money that you can pay rent somewhere, that you can go get a job somewhere with your, through your parole officer. I've had, gosh, the conversations I've had with the people I've met, where the parole officer asked a parole officer, do most people leaving prison have a plan? He cut me off before I could finish asking. He goes, no. They don't have a plan. Some of them, the plan is to go right back in there because it's safe. They don't have to make any of their own decisions. Decisions are made for them. The system is just going to keep them alive, keep them housed, keep them fed, and that's enough for them. That's what they're living for. There is no goal to go out here and become great in some kind of productive way. That does not exist in the minds of most of those people coming out of prison.
Well, that's an indictment on the fact that for a lot of them, they're making an accurate assessment of the opportunities afforded to them outside those walls.
I asked him, how do you create that? He goes, I don't know. He goes, I've been doing this over 30 years. I don't have an answer to that question. You just have to have, he went on to say, you just have to have an individual that's motivated to change. They gotta have that vision for themselves. They gotta be able to walk away. I'm not doing any of this BS anymore. I'm not going back there. I'm not even gonna halfway do anything crooked. I'm gonna go down to the job center and I'm gonna get a job and I'm gonna work for everything I have from now on, and that's fine. I'm not going back to that old system. That has to be the attitude. I used to live out near the beach. Oh my gosh. And I was in a Starbucks and a police officer was in line behind me. I'm like, oh, you could go ahead, figuring he had to, he probably got to get somewhere. And I said, officer, can I ask you a question? He goes, sure. I said, what one thing could you change about society, or would you want changed about society if you could, that would make your job easier? He immediately had an answer. He goes, that's easy. I would want people not to take things that didn't belong to them. You don't steal someone else's property, their car, their spouse. He goes, think about how much that would eliminate the need for me to get in my car and go to their house or go to this or that business. If people could just do that one thing, don't take what doesn't belong to you.
But see, the thing I wonder is how much do people like that? Because people like that, to me, they end up blaming the poor for being poor because they're rarely supportive of the type of meaningful economic change that we need to make it so people don't have. So they'll say, oh, I wish people didn't rob each other, but you also don't want to raise the minimum wage, do you? Like, you know what I mean?
But that's not his point. That's not his pocket locker. That's not his point. You have millionaires that steal. They're millionaires that steal. They're millionaires that drive drunk, right? They could literally hire a driver to take them. They could call an Uber. They could simply, I used to work at a bar. I was so happy to call cabs for people or to hail cabs for people because I didn't want them driving home drunk. And the fact that they respected the lives of other people and their own to not do so was great. I think parking garages shouldn't have overnight.
But most people who steal, right? That we're worried about this. Yes, there's billionaires that they're gross, and they need to pay their taxes and go to prison when they do. But yeah, I think that the main, we know most crime is highly associated with poverty, and we live in a world where there's no reason for people to be in poverty.
I think it's unfair to put words in that guy's mouth. Because I think he really hit upon something. I don't care at what income level you function at or have dysfunction at. His statement is powerful. Just don't take what doesn't belong to you.
It's powerful,
and you automatically make the world a better place.
But it also is very meaningless when there's a lot of people who need to steal. Stealing is the I don't
They don't need to steal. look, I can go to my local grocery store, and if let's say no one that's not even my local grocery store, and they don't recognize me there, I could walk in and say, "Can I speak to the manager, please?" And I could say, "I know you guys have these programs where you help people out, where you donate food and stuff like that, or you participate in that. That's what I need right now. I have a list of things my wife tells me we need.
So they
Can
have to
you?"
beg.
You have to ask. Asking is not begging. There's a Methodist church, or my neighbor's
Do you
church. I don't
realize
know if
that? Do you realize that you literally can't do this? That like you could get the manager of a grocery store fired because they're like not allowed to do this.
they could give away the food, or they could pay for it out of their own pocket. I don't know someone who would rather have you steal from them
And I don't know
than them
someone who
give
would
it to
rather
you.
steal than just walk to a grocery store manager and ask for food. Most people, that is not a viable. That is not a. There's no viable way to sustain themselves by just walking into places and asking for food, or else they wouldn't steal it. That has to be part of it. And then again,
But think of,
why is it bad to
again,
ask that guy the
it's
question?
cheaper.
If that
It's
guy
more.
really look, if me,
It
I'm trying to help him.
it
If he
pays it
really,
pays better to be the cop than the criminal.
but if he
It's another.
really
We talked about this
if he
earlier. It's
really
another one of
doesn't
those
if he
situations.
really doesn't want people to take other people's stuff, he should really not want people to feel like they need to. And it should be of therefore a concern of his that nobody be below a certain economic threshold, because even if you recognize that will not get rid of all theft, again, a meaningless straw man. There's billions of people on the planet. You're never gonna. People are always gonna do crazy stuff, but you would get a lot of people would not want to steal anymore. I don't even think that's that controversial. I'm not trying to make a hot take. I'm just saying a lot of people steal because they're poor. Wouldn't it be great if they were not poor anymore? Why
And if
why
they
is it
get
not
caught,
noble to like not want poor
if they
people
get
anymore?
caught, they will be poorer.
If they
They will set themselves, as we said at pretty much the outset of the program. It's more lucrative to be the cop than it is to be the criminal.
So isn't it better to just raise people at a minimum wage, and then they don't have to steal and they don't have to get caught, and
All
you
right,
know
I'll see if I can talk about this without you interrupting me, because you've interrupted me when I brought this up.
I'm just trying to understand why
I couldn't even get started.
I'm trying to ask you a question, like why.
I'm trying to tell you. So go ahead, Pocket Locker. Go ahead.
I'm literally just trying to understand why is part of the goal not to help people out economically?
We have programs to do that
Yeah, but
that
they're
help
clearly not
people,
working, right? We want more of them.
or people don't take advantage of them. Pocket Locker. They're programs that if you need help getting food, like WIC, to feed your family, you can get that. A lot of people qualify for it. There's cash aid for people that are homeless or over a certain age. And there are lots of programs like this here in California, right? I, I didn't spend very much of my adult life at all in Indiana. I can't tell you what's there. I've traveled around to different places in the world and stuff. I've still lived most of my time here. When I lived in another country, I paid like that much attention to their politics. I can't tell you what they do in Bulgaria. I can't tell you what they do in Georgia. I can't tell you what they do in Anguilla. I don't know what the political laws are and how they help poor people there. I just know when people ask me for money, I probably gave it to them. Unless I saw somebody sort of making their kid beg for money, and people told me like it's kind of a scam, then I stopped. But if that's not what I saw, if it's just somebody with their little cup out or whatever, what's it to me? Here's a few lari, here's a few leva, you know. So when I was in high school, one of my jobs was working as a burger flipper or making breakfast and stuff like that at a fast food chain. We had someone who was in his 30s working with us. This was his second job. He was saving up money to bring his wife from the Philippines. We also had a woman, Dolly. Oh, she was so wonderful. Dolly was in her 70s collecting Social Security, and this was the job just to help supplement her income. We didn't have other people in their 30s that weren't in management working there, or in their 20s that weren't in management working there. It was a job for kids and, you know, retirees. The managers were, one was in her 50s, another, two of them were in their 40s, and they were making, and this is back in the 80s, 65K a year or 85K a year, depending whether they're the manager or assistant, in Fort Wayne, Indiana. That's what they were getting, which was a fortune. I was making, when I left, I think about $3.35 an hour back then. I do understand that minimum wage in many places isn't that high, but that was a job for kids. That's the way I saw it. If I wanted to make more money, it was by doing a different job. That's what I learned. Just go do a different job somewhere else. Get a job at a tool and die factory, go to work at General Motors, go to work at a supermarket, which paid better than what we were making. There were other jobs. You escalate your skill set and you escalate your pay. That's how I was taught. You move up.
Yeah, I just think a lot of people, you know, it's really hard to move up. I think upward mobility is the motto of the system. I don't think it actually works. And I think part of the thing is to trick those of us who have some measure or degree of upward mobility into thinking that that's really more likely for other people than it is. It's like, I forget what it's called. It's similar to like survivor's bias or something like that. But the other thing I was gonna say is like, why not just universal basic income type thing though, right? Like that's all I'm getting at is universal basic income now. Yeah, working's great, but even if you don't work, you're good, and now you don't have to. It's not so hard to, you know, access resources from the system because everybody just has them. I just always wonder where people's resistance to providing a certain baseline for people that just doesn't require all this comes from.
Well, I can tell you, a lot of people have worked very hard to get what they have, regardless of how little it is, right? My best friend's mom, she paid $36,000 for her house like 50 years ago. It's worth like 250 today, 250. Fort Wayne, Indiana. It's worth about 250. So should someone get a free house if she could say, hey, it took me 30 years to pay this place off? Why are you giving houses away? No one gave me this. There's that. The people will feel cheated that now all these other people are coming along and they don't have to work as hard. Now, I got places I could go with that because robots in your home are coming. And when
Yeah,
they
I
can
think
have a
they're
robot in your
selfish.
home,
Yeah,
they
I
can
think
have
there's
robots pick your food and do all the, well,
yeah.
let me finish. They'll have robots to be able to do all these jobs human beings have been toiling away at for millennia. The robots can do it. Now, that means you essentially could have a higher quality of life. You essentially could, right? If you're an artist, you could just make your art. The robots can grow your food right there at your yard. You can have a place out in the middle of nowhere. The robots will figure out how to get moisture from the air and grow all the food you need on your 1 acre or your 2 acres. They'll figure it out. But there'll be people complaining, why are you doing this? Why is this free for them and not for me? How come I had to struggle? I think everybody should struggle. It builds character.
Yeah, they're terrible people. And they're holding us back because these things are happening, and that's what I'm saying. We should want to lose our jobs. If a machine can do my job, let a machine do my job. I shouldn't therefore be poor because now a machine can do my job. And so people are scared of AI when really we should be saying like, no, AI is good. The problem is corporate greed. The problem is we have all these new technologies, and instead of working for the people, they work for the owner class, the donor class, and so then we're still at each other's necks. And really, it's like, yo, let's just have a universal basic income. Let's divorce the idea of our economic security being tied to how much profit we're generating for somebody else. People still want to go ahead and do that. They can, and bring on the robots because it should free us. It should enhance our liberty, and we don't want to do that. We literally want to ensure that even in a world where literally there's no need for us to be doing these jobs, that we spend most of our time doing them, and then we're gonna cheer ourselves on as free people. I think that's crazy.
Look, you're an educator. Everything you teach comes from a book, right?
Sure, not everything, but yeah,
Nearly
we
everything.
teach
So
out of a book.
The book is essentially the robot.
Yes, and the more automated my job gets, the better it is. And it's literally gotten to a point where the next iteration or two, there will be no need for me to be in the classroom.
What would fees drop to if the robot taught the class?
Well, I don't care.
Right? If it's just an audio, if it's an audio book.
Not my problem.
How are you going to make your money? The universal basic income?
Again, we shouldn't. See, this is what I mean. Me and you ain't
but
never
where's the money come from? Where does it come from?
The robots are making the money. You laugh, but you're laughing, but this is cruel.
This is so hard. This is so hard to talk about.
You literally want to maintain people's need to work, and y'all. All I'm just saying is think about your vision. You're in a world. What is freedom? Is freedom really? I work 60 hours a week and I barely have any time for myself. That is not freedom. Freedom would be do what you want to do. Why fix cars a couple hours a night in a day or two on the weekends when you could be working on your bikes, your cars, whatever you want full time? And instead, and I'm not talking about everybody gets 10,000. I'm talking everybody probably makes what we would consider the equivalent now to like 90, maybe even $100,000. Because believe it or not, if we had a universal, you look at me like I'm crazy. People will make a lot of money. If we actually distributed the wealth, even people make a lot of money. Plus, you got to remember all the money that people are going to make with automation and robots and getting rid of human error and the expense of taking care of workers. People have no idea. I'm just saying, people need have some imagination. Can you not even imagine? Can you not even imagine a world where there's just enough profit generated that literally corporations, it could literally just get split to a populace and we can have a universal basic income and that can be okay? And people don't have to work for a living?
The corporation will only... Okay, so when I was in the high school, teachers start talking about, we have a finance unit or whatever. They start talking about the stock market, investing money. You buy a stock pays a dividend. I said, well, how much are these dividends? Oh, you might get $1 per share. Wait a second. If I've paid $15 for this share of stock and they give me $4 a year for my money, I could have built something, bought and sold it, and made more money. Yeah, but the value of your stock might also go up. And then you sell it to somebody else. And so I'm basically looking for a bigger fool, right? Well, kind of. I had all these questions like that. Why investing just seemed like a really horrible idea. It was the worst way to make money. And yet we have people like the Warren Buffetts of the world. That's exactly what they did. They jumped. Well, he married rich. That guy married rich. Don't let him fool you. But anyway, Berkshire Hathaway made textiles. They were all a big company. But anyway, there's a great way you can make a lot of money selling stocks and trading stocks and stuff like that. I know people who have done so. And yeah, you can game the system and all that stuff, but the money that you're paying the society, the individuals in the society, pocket locker, where does that come from? Who generates that? Is it just money by fiat? We're going to introduce another $2 billion in the monetary supply
No,
to cover this year.
generates that. The economy generates that.
How?
I'm through work.
But you just said the robots are going to do the work. Did I misunderstand you?
Yeah, the robots do the work.
What are they making? Who buys what they sell? Who owns the robots?
We do.
So I own. It's like it's let's. So it's
All right,
like I own
we'll do
a
another episode.
Tesla.
I literally gotta go. I got a fantasy draft starting. But that's what I'm saying. Like, I just don't think I'm not a capitalist. So I don't think people need to be profit driven. I think there's plenty of money that can be made, and I don't think people's value should be tied to their work. I think it's all fun and games when you make a lot of money and you're educated and you're able-bodied, but you have to imagine, I believe that a fair society is when you roll that dice, you come out as anybody. Okay, now that means you might come out deaf, dumb, blind, and literally like unable to take care of yourself. What now? To me, in a world where most jobs can eventually be done automatically, I'm not saying yes, people are gonna have to work, people are gonna have to maintain the machines, people like they're gonna do stuff, and people who want to work a lot, have an extra job, have a fancy job, I'm not saying people can't make money anymore. Like, you can still make money, but there's no reason we can't support a universal basic income. As a matter of fact, I think it's probably, if we really did an honest assessment, it's probably costing us more money not to. We probably spend way more money with our fucked up system and all the ways we have to compensate for it than we would if people just had enough money, that everybody had enough money to eat, everybody had enough money to have a roof over their head. That doesn't mean everybody lives in a mansion. If you want to go live in a mansion so everybody knows how fancy you are and how much better you are than everybody else, you can still do that. But again, there's really no need for us to have homeless. Even Kamala Harris said housing is a human right. There's going to come a time where most of us feel the same way. If you're going to make us live in a money-driven economy, we're going to start to say having enough money to live a decent life, raise a family, should just be a human right. And honestly, you might be a capitalist. I'm not getting anything out of this system. I worked real hard. I stayed in school. I got a dual PhD. I'm now a tenure track professor at a really good university. I will never make enough money to buy a new car. I will very unlikely make enough money to own a home. There's really no chance. So I'm not really invested in this system. I've worked really hard. I've done really well for myself, and still there's certain things that are considered like basics of life are like well beyond my reach. I honestly think if we had a universal basic income, I would make more money not working. And I also think in where technology is technology, like we can't stop the technology. So we are literally creating a world in which cars are going to be able to drive themselves. There are going to be machines and robots that can do our jobs. So to me, it's tantamount to slavery to force people to do jobs we know they don't want to do, that they don't have to do, just to make them make money, because we refuse to just provide them with enough to live when we can. I just think it's a much less cruel world to give people universal basic income, and then people look forward to automation, and then have the government regulate what's done in automation such that it contributes to make the most gain for the public and not private interest. And I think the capitalists will still do it, and they'll be fine.
A few weeks ago, I said we'll talk about that screenplay that I had. It's called Becoming Me, and it's about a guy who becomes a robot, human being who gets a robotic body because his grandson doesn't want him to die, and the problems that he makes society wrestle with, because he essentially is now immortal. Parts wear down, just slip into a new mechanical body, swap out a part maybe. All right, do your fantasy thing. Everybody has an assignment.
All right.
Go on YouTube, listen to Plato's Republic, And then when we circle back to have this conversation about this universal basic income, we'll have a little more reference material to go to and bounce off each other and be critical of each other.
All right, be